right. Happy Tuesday, everyone, and welcome back to another Learning Tech Talks, where we are exploring the landscape of learning, workplace tech, all sorts of things. And today we're talking about, I would say, business transformation, change management. And you might go, what does that have to do with learning? And hopefully by the end of this conversation, you go, we're saying the same thing. We're saying the same thing. It's not a different topic. And so to navigate this conversation with me is Larry Mohl from Rali. And Larry, thank you. We almost missed going live. We were just jamming in the back, and I suddenly looked at the clock. I know. We're like, we're going to end up having this conversation and forget to hit go live. So thanks for making it.
Oh, thanks for having me on. I will say it's really a pleasure. And I was jamming to that intro music. I just want you to know, you told me I could dance to myself, and I did. So I just want to make that clear.
Yeah. Well, you know what? The nice thing is that nobody can see you dancing except for me, because I can see the studio camera backstage, but nobody else saw that.
I feel better
So
now.
yeah. Well, so I'm looking. So I'm looking forward to the conversation, and so let's start a little bit with your background, because when we first met, we connected right away, in that we have a little bit of non-traditional background. So. Yeah. Give me the backstory of where you came from and how your journey through L&D.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity to talk about that. So I do have a non-traditional background. I actually have a master's degree in biomedical engineering. I know, it's crazy. And I'm older than dirt. I graduated with my graduate degree in 1983. I was fortunate at that time to get a job with Motorola in Chicago. They were looking for people with my background. So I entered that company doing basic research, technology research, systems research, and that kind of good stuff.
Biomedical technology with Motorola.
With Motorola.
So this was back
1983. This was
1983. Okay.
Yeah. So a lot of work I was in the division that was working on radio technology and just starting to figure out how we went from analog to digital. So I was on those. I was doing that kind of research with really smart people. Let's just say.
I mean, Motorola was king back then when it came to this type of tech. I mean, they were king of the crop when it came to this space.
Absolutely. So I did that role. I was in research for about 8 years, but then I kind of wanted to see a little more. Research. If you had a success in 2 or 3 years, that was a big thing. I was more looking for some more immediate returns. So I took a job, actually leading a software development group and product management and product development. But honestly, at Motorola at the time, was one thing I talk about, was one of the motivations for what I do now. The culture there was very much a learning culture. The CEO was an engineer, and he believed fundamentally that if we're not learning faster than anybody else, we're going to fall behind. And he inculcated the culture that way. And so I was kind of thinking, I have more love for working with people and doing things, than just developing products. And so Motorola, he came back from a big trip to China and said, this thing called Six Sigma, quality improvement, that we need to do. We really need to do this. And it was fascinating to me. So I jumped on and said, so I was walking in 2 roles. I was leading my engineering group, and I was learning about process improvement, and I was facilitating teams around the entire world.
That's a massive transfer. I mean, by the way, I have mad respect for that. One of my professors in grad school was in charge of when GE did that, and he got tasked with we got to figure this out for GE. And I mean, that's a level of complexity.
It was an insane time, but a most incredible time of my early career, because I got to see the whole business, because I was flying around the world working with these teams, both in engineering and other teams, and helping them to improve their processes. And then, because it's Motorola, you got to meet some of the Peter Sangays and these people of the world who, the chief learning officer at Motorola would call them, and they'd be like, yeah, we're there. So it's not about me.
It opens doors. No, I know it opens doors when you're like, well, I'm this person at this company. And suddenly you have an opportunity to engage where others may be like, I don't know. Let's see what happens.
Exactly.
Cool.
So this ingrained this idea of continuous improvement, and all these kind of stories came to my realization one day of what I wanted to do after my corporate life. But so that whole world of continuous improvement and how you do that is like, I can't walk into a restaurant without like re-engineering their buffet line. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, it just gets into your DNA and
It gets, yeah, it feels like one of those things where once you see it, you can't look back. I remember spending some time with the McDonald's group.
Yeah.
And when you learned about their innovation center and how they, I can't go to a McDonald's now without going, okay, yep, I see exactly how this thing runs.
Exactly. So fast forward after, 3 or 4 years of doing that around the world, and this idea started to hit called knowledge management. Remember that? So I was just happened to be in the right places at
early
the right
days
time.
of KM.
The world of KM. And of course, Motorola did what everybody else did. They gave it to the IT people because the idea was, let's just build a bunch of knowledge databases and everybody's going to
we'll just create a bunch of knowledge sets and put it somewhere, a wiki, right? But whatever it was at the time.
Yeah. And, so I was like, well, that's really interesting. But, last time I remember, there was like people that actually have the knowledge. So anyway, long story short, I took over the role of chief knowledge officer for the company. And what I did with that was I created communities of practice globally around the world. So now at the time, our technology was a telephone and a listserv. So if anybody remembers the word listserv, that's what I had. So I had to develop all these playbooks because engineers weren't really that happy to share all their knowledge about how they make a
there was a bit of a guard. Again, going back to the fact this is all held by people.
Exactly.
There's this little bit of identity of like, well, holding on to this knowledge is actually something that adds value to me as an asset. I don't know how comfortable I am with giving that out.
Exactly. So I played around with a lot of interesting things, but I found a formula that worked, and some of that formula is in what I'm doing now. But so that experience then led to an offer to help actually jump into the business more at the cell phone division. And so I became the head of learning, the CLO for the cell phone division of the company, which, to your point, Chris, in the cell phone world, we had been leading the world, but this little company called Nokia did this deal with AT&T and destroyed Motorola's market share in
I know the rise and fall of Motorola Telecom.
Oh my God. And I was in the middle of that mess. So we were losing $1 million a month. It was not an easy. So I went in there to kind of help turn that around, and a lot of changes that we made, and it worked. We did turn it around and got it back on its feet. But then I got an offer from American Express. So I became the global chief learning officer for Amex, and then did that for several years. Great organization to work for. But the biomedical healthcare stuff was still pulling at me. So I always wanted to get back to healthcare. So I came here to Atlanta, where I am today, and became the chief learning officer and head of all kinds of fun things at Children's Healthcare of Atlanta, which is, a very large pediatric system. And I think was a little different about my roles, because one of the things that I had learned on my journey in learning was that, and this is just, again, my opinion, is that if you only have the learning lever, again, as a performance guy, if you only have the learning lever, you're missing some things.
You are.
To make change. And so I always wanted to call myself the chief capability officer or something like that, because, you've got learning, you've got process, you've got technology, you've got
a tool. It's like having a woodshed, but only having like a bandsaw. It's like, I mean, it's great, but it's limiting in terms of what you can do.
Yeah. So I was always fortunate to kind of talk people into say, can I have the other levers too? I promise I won't hoard them.
You slowly are like acquiring the other component. So that leads me to this piece then.
Yeah.
And this is, again, where we've had some very fun conversations, which is how we almost lost track of time, was just kind of the journeys we've been on, because we have these haphazard journeys that we've both been down. Absolutely. But inside the house, you're inside the house doing the learning capability, right? You've had a broad set of experiences, and then you made the jump to entrepreneurship, which that's not, I often find that's not super common. Like a lot of folks, they either commit to, I'm sticking the internal route, I'm just going to do that, maybe move to a different org, different area, different capability. But you went outside. What was the driver behind that?
There were several drivers. One is, I mean, I loved Children's Healthcare of Atlanta. I loved the organization with a passion. And, but at the same time, as things started to play out, it was like, been there, done that feeling, you know what I mean?
Okay.
In terms of part of it's kind of been there, done that after being a CLO for so many years and driving these things internally. Second was I've always kind of been an entrepreneur. Like I've never had a job after my engineering jobs that I didn't make up.
Okay.
Like I just made them up. I'm honestly, I just made them up, and I would get.
Okay. So it had like a job title, but when people were like, "What is this?" You're like, "Well, actually, I kind of crafted it."
Made that one up, and then Motorola, like I said at the time, if you had good ideas and you had some sponsors and you had been a good performer, they found a way in that culture to
They
keep
made it work.
you. I mean, unbelievable place at the time, and so I just made all those. So I was like, I've always felt like, and I was turning 50, which and I'm like. And then the third thing was, very honestly, I was very frustrated. I'm just going to say this out loud, is that I was very frustrated that the way that we were doing things is easy to count, but is it like we're putting all this energy into doing these things? We're spending this money, this time, and I can't even tell you what the outcome is without doing a couple surveys, which no one believes anyway. So I'm like, what are we all about as a profession? And
I love the transparency. I mean, in some ways, it can feel like a bit of a hamster wheel where you're like, we're pouring all this energy in, we're doing all this stuff, and to what end?
To what end? And I'm sorry, I'm used to, like, when I was an operations leader, like I had to put something on the table. I didn't get money automatically. Like when I was at Children's Healthcare, I actually did a leadership development where I had to demonstrate at least $1 million in value to get budgeted in the next year. And I'm the one that set it up that way. What an idiot I was. But the point is, like, I really believe that we can do better, and that when we do better, it has such a leveraged impact on the people and the organization that we just need to do better. And I was very frustrated talking, again, nothing ever wrong about traditional LMSs, but I was looking at how these different technologies are being used, and I had discovered some methodologies that I felt moved the needle. And so it was just kind of one of those things like, okay, I'm going to build a little prototype, and if I can get somebody to give me some money, I guess I'll do it.
Okay.
And that's basically what happened. Yeah.
And then once you realized, hey, there's something to it, then it went from there.
And it was working. It was actually presenting these ideas to fellow CLOs that I was, had relationships with. And they were very encouraging. They were like, I don't see something like this. Now, this was 2014, 15, and the market has moved a lot. But at the time, it was really something.
Well, but the thing you bring up, and I think this is an important point, because I know there's a fair amount of vendors that listened, into this, and who knows, might be watching now too. But the gravitational pull, and this is where it can be, I share in your frustration sometimes. Well, at the same time, part of me is like, there is such a gravitational pull to the way it's been done.
Yes.
I mean, the gravity force is massive. To try and break out of the stratosphere sometimes just feels like, I mean, it's just so difficult because, and I get it on the vendor space. I spend a lot of time with vendors, and I know so many vendors that really want to do different, but like the market almost just drags them back because it's like, well, I love that idea, but we also have to do exactly everything that we've done before. And it's like,
that's right.
And same thing as practitioners. I've seen so many folks in my peer groups where they have great aspirations to do things, but the gravitational pull of their stakeholders, of even their own teams sometimes, like, well, I don't know. You're like trying to inspire and move, and it is not a task for someone who's not willing to get the crap beat out of you. I mean, it can be very, very tiresome, and that's where I have a lot of empathy for it. I think sometimes you see in LinkedIn and stuff, people are razzing everybody, and you go, I mean, to some degree I get it, but to some degree I'm like, this is not a job for the weak.
No,
by any means.
It is not. I don't, and I would say for all you other development people out there, leaders of development or perform, I don't think other people understand the complexity of your role and kind of the personal risk you're taking, because I know for a fact, and I've been there, that something that doesn't go well, like a consultant can come in and leave, but if it doesn't go well, like I'm here.
You're on the line.
It's
You're
me.
on the line.
You're
Well,
on the line.
and I think this conversation is especially helpful. I mean, I think it's helpful for even sometimes it's like therapy when you talk to other folks who are in, and you're like, oh, good, thank goodness I'm not alone, type of a thing. But even for folks in the coming ranks who are coming up, to recognize there is this transition. And the thing I think that's important that we're talking, and we will get to the change management piece because that is really important. But we're talking about change management within our own industry, which is kind of the interesting part.
It
is that you can't ignore the value of some of the things that have to happen, right? At the granular level, like the kind of traditional L&D things. It's like, those are important things that have to happen, but they have to happen in the larger ecosystem of everything else.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes where I see it fall apart is as people are growing through the ranks, they don't recognize that you have to start expanding your spectrum outside of that very functionally specific thing. Like you said, it's like, yeah, great. If you were doing leadership development, in this sense, there's nothing wrong with that. But as you start to expand, you got to start going, it's that. And like, what are all the other things and how am I accounting for that? And not just staying in my comfort zone of like, well, this is what I know and I do well. Like, great, let somebody else deal with that, because you got to start tackling all these other things. And I think that's some things where I've seen people try and move up, and they hit a ceiling where they just go, why am I not making it? And it's like, you're still looking at the world through blinders, and you've got to expand your horizons big time.
Yeah, I think that's a very, very good insight. And I think, what I'm reflecting on as you say that is that as you expand your horizon, this is a change problem. You are starting to also move you're moving across functional disciplines in your company.
Yes.
So if you're going to be the leader of learning and you're really interested in this end outcome, and there is an OD group, even within HR, you have to cross those functional lines and get those stakeholders to agree on the outcome that we're all going for and how we work together to get there. And if that's an important enough outcome for the company. So I'm not going to sit here and say like everything is equally important. I mean, there's a lot of learning that I call, for lack of a better word, it's essential stuff. It's got to happen. But there's a class of learning, development, and change that's initiative focused on the company, that comes straight from the company strategy. And it's like, if that stuff doesn't get funding, then I'm not sure what we're doing. That's what I'm trying to say.
Well, and I think, again, you can set off things when you start talking, classes, but it's like, it's not really about classes. It's about complexity and understanding this stuff. And again, if the foundations aren't there, the building will crumble in on itself. I think sometimes that's where it's like, no, there is tremendous value in the essential. We have to get it done, because if you don't have compliance training done, knock it all you want. If it doesn't get done, all it takes is one lawsuit and the company's like, boop, out the door.
And as a CLO,
you can't deny
that's your responsibility. You got to make sure that stuff's in place.
You've got to make sure you're doing that. But then you also can't get so overly focused on that you forget that it's like, and if you're not also doing these big strategic, okay, how does this tie to the transformation of the business and what are we doing? Then you do become a cost center, because it's like, well, I mean, we need you to keep the lights on, but you're not necessarily
adding value,
adding value above and beyond we have to keep you here. We have to keep you here.
Well, and the other thing you said that really, for me, brought something up, is like, you said, the gravity of pulling you into the traditional way of doing things. So one of the things practically that I did, which again, I give the children's leadership the credit for seeing this, because I spoke about this a lot. So when I was at children's, I don't know, because I had been doing this role for a long time, I would say I found courage. Okay. I found courage to speak truth about the fact that I didn't want to do a program that didn't have impact, and that to make impact, it's less about the actual content and more about how the company puts the content into practice. It's more about the environment and these kinds of things. And I talked to my executive team, and they at some point kind of gave in. and it was like, so here's what we can do. Before we roll out anything, how about if I take every manager and above in the company through a little 2-hour thing about how to create high impact from what their people are going to classes and doing things that, because otherwise they're going to do it. But I can tell you from my research, only 10% of them are going to ever do anything different in your world of work. Is that what you want to pay for? And I
Yes.
did that at Children's, and I was able to move the needle. As part of what I did there was to actually move the needle, because you're talking to people who you can't expect them to understand everything around learning and performance. That's not their
No.
job, you know?
Even though everybody thinks they do,
Yeah,
because
of
like
course
I
they
went to
do.
school, right?
Everybody's
But
a
I mean,
marketer and everybody's a learning person.
yes. Well, and kind of going back to this piece, Walter, I really like the way you put this. The traditional compliance learning, it's like it's the right to operate. If you can't at least do that really well, you just won't even be present anymore. But again,
Absolutely.
it's just table stakes. It's like, well, that is the expectation. That's even your right to exist here in the organization. But then often in our industry, we talk about wanting to have this seat at the table and be part of
Right.
these. And it's like, you're not going to be invited to the table
Yeah,
if you're stuck in right to operate mode.
that's right.
You're
That is
here,
right.
you're keeping the lights on. We're not going to invite you into a strategic business transformation discussion because you're still thinking about whether we're at 90% completion of our compliance metrics, which is important,
Yeah,
but that's not what's shifting the direction of the business.
that's right. Right on.
So, well, and something else that Boss brought up that I think is a really good point as we're talking about this kind of expansion piece. And I think this, people might be going like, I thought we were having a conversation about change management. But what I love about where we've done this is we're actually talking about these essential elements as it relates to our own field.
Exactly.
As we talk about, well, okay, yeah, this is true. We're going to get into, well, how does this apply outside? But like, this is the kind of stuff, if you're an L&D function or in an L&D role going, how do we do business transformation? Because that's what we should be doing
That's
on
what we should do.
ourselves.
Right.
Going, how do we show up to work? Well, we need to transform who we are
Right.
because the right to operate bar, if I've seen anything over the past couple of years, that bar just keeps creeping up. Like right to operate used to be, yeah, we have an LMS, we administrate it, we do a couple things, and that's the right to operate just keeps ratcheting up the scales, and we have to business transform ourselves if we're going to stay
Absolutely.
relevant. So I think that opportunity to apply those transferable skills and expand is huge, Boss.
Yeah, I would say that there is a time right now that's never existed, and specifically two trends that have come together at the same time. Number one, business transformation isn't like a once a year topic in the boardroom. It's like
it's not optional
every
either, and
day.
it doesn't matter what company or industry
Right.
you're in.
And the second thing is that for the first time in my lifetime, the employee now is at the center of the value chain for every company. How do I find them? How do I keep them? How do I develop them? And employees have power that they never had before. And executives realize this. And who better than the L&D folks to teach executives and work with the company to say, how do we grow these people while you're doing change with them? Because that's the opportunity right here.
Yeah. Well, and this goes to what we said in the beginning of, well, what does this have to do with learning? Everything. Literally everything. Everything we're talking about has to do with learning, because at the end of the day, businesses run on people.
Yes.
And I think there is so much greater of a recognition of that now, at least for sure in my history of career. I think before it's been like, well, if we get the right priorities or we invest in the right this,
we care
it's like
about
now.
people. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, yeah, we'll care about people, but like ultimately we just need to, get our IT strategy right or our business strategy right. And now it's like, no, if we miss this people mark, it doesn't, we could be the best company in the world, have the greatest strategy, have all this. If our people aren't right, we're going to sink real quick.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay. So then that there's the intro, everyone. We're almost halfway through and there's the intro. So hopefully you've been following along. But so then that gets to, okay, this is really important stuff. And then you said, you know what? I see an opportunity to do this. And I think I want to do this here at Atlanta Jet, but I actually want to do this bigger than this because the opportunity is greater than
Yeah.
what I can affect in an
Yeah.
organization. So now you start Rally,
Yes.
and people say, "What's that?"
What the heck
I
is
mean, how
that?
do you answer that? Is it a like? What do you say when somebody's like, "So you left your executive job to start Rally? What is it?"
Yeah. So I say it this way is that my experience from these different things, doing continuous improvement, social learning, performance improvement, all these things, and as as a technologist, I said,
Okay.
I really feel that if it's true, if you believe these statistics, which I kind of believe based on my experience and my own workplace research, that only 10% of people, given the traditional way of doing stuff,
Is this the curve slide? You
that's
want
the
me to bring
curve.
that one
Yeah.
up?
Yeah. The
Okay, let me
curve.
bring that one in
Yeah,
because
that
I
we were
think,
talking
yeah,
about. So this was based on not only my research, but a lot of smart people. But basically, if you take a traditional e-learning workshop, even a sequence of workshops, that kind of stuff, and you put 100 people in it, I think you might see this same uh, dynamic in your own organization is you're going to get 10 to 50% of people who are absolutely next day going to do something with it.
just be like, boom, I saw it. I had a vision. I get it. I'm just going to do it.
And
You're going to have that
you
percentage,
probably
that
see
sliver.
you probably see the faces of those people in your mind right now. And they're your I call them your learning animals, right? They're like
Yep.
intrinsically motivated because you show them one thing and they got 10 questions and 15 ideas. And you're like,
Right.
can everybody be like you, please?
Right. Yes.
It's
Yep.
also
We all know
true.
who they are. They're like they're the ones you go, man, wouldn't it be great if we had a whole class of these folks or a
Oh my
whole group
God.
of these,
Yeah.
in this cohort that just, yep, I
Yeah.
got it. And would
Right.
this be another way to apply this? And you're like, wow, I hadn't, yes,
I had
actually
not thought that.
great
Right.
insight.
Yeah. And so then, of course, you've got the other end, which is the 50%, which you're like, I'm going to give you $1 million. I just need you to finish this 10-minute thing. And it's like,
Right.
not on my watch. I'm not doing that.
I'm going to
You
do
can't make
everything
me.
I can to
You can't
not
make me.
do the thing. Well, and what's funny about that group is, and I see this happens, and I don't think it's just in our industry. I think there's opportunity to help influence stakeholders with this. But if on this typical adoption curve, I have often seen so many resources thrown at that bottom 10 to 15%.
That's the problem.
Like, let's just keep,
Let it go.
how do we get that 15% to
Let it go.
16? And it's like, honestly, the effort you're putting in is making that 15 go to like 6, because the harder you push, the more they're like, oh, you really want me to do this, don't you? I'm not going to do it, even though now I see why it might be helpful, but like, I'm just not going to do it because you want me to, type of a thing.
Exactly. And these dynamics are real. But what was really, I would say, heartening about this is you've got this huge group of people who are saying, and we called them conditionally engaged, right? They're like, if somebody I respect does it, I could see this. If my environment around me, like they want to do something for themselves and my theory is that nobody
There's a
really wakes up in the morning and says, today's my day to screw up my job and mess up my organization. I just can't believe that, really.
You've got the 10, 15% that they are those people. They're just like, I hate life, and I want nothing to do with anything, even if it's going to make it better.
Exactly.
Okay, fine.
So
but
this is a long answer to what Rally is, but this is, if that's okay. But what that led to, here's what's really interesting. What I found was that traditional L&D folks, if they're doing some measurement and notice that group is not adopting, our tendency is to throw more content at them.
Yes. At the middle group. Like when they see it's not moving, it's like, let's tell them more stuff. It's a knowledge problem.
And what I found was that it actually moved people to the left instead of the right.
Interesting.
So if you go to the next slide that I'd shared with you, Christopher, then you'll see I basically came to this idea that how do we do this in a way where, what is a change in our approach that says, how do we move from this, tracking events to put people in a journey? And this is where I came up with this little signature learn to inspire thing. How do I move from saying, if I get Chris to change and Larry to change and Rick to change and Janice to change, without ever talking to each other, somehow the organization is going to change. It does not work that way. People change in
Okay.
groups in the context of their teams. I can move from content to action, from telling people what to do to listening and coaching. These are not rocket science things. Okay. I'm not going to
No,
say,
but I want to talk through these because I think catching yourself in these like initial knee-jerk reactions or recognizing this is what people do when that middle group doesn't move, right? Each one of these, you think the initial reaction, like the event, you're like, I know, let's put another thing on the calendar. And it's like,
exactly.
no, because that's not what's causing it. What may be causing it is people are stuck in that one thing. They already feel overwhelmed. They
That's
need to
right.
feel like there's a path.
That's
Trying
right.
to jam it all into one thing actually is going to compound the idea that this is too much for me to handle. If you tackle the individual, that's kind of like, yeah, let's go after all the people on the list that didn't complete the training and tell them, we see you, we're coming for you.
That's right.
You're going to kind of push them away versus going, hey, collectively, how do we bring you together? Like, oh, you don't know enough. Let's make you do yet another thing instead of going, I get it.
Yeah.
I just don't know what to do with it. Like, what do you want me?
Do?
Yeah, give me an action. Tell me to go take action. I mean, all of these things, I can completely see where the just intuitive response is
Yeah.
what you're seeing on the left. Like,
Yeah.
oh, that middle
It
group's
is.
not moving. Let's jump to this. When in fact, it's actually,
Exactly.
let's stop. Why is it happening? Let's
Right.
unwind that. And on the right is actually where you go. That's what's actually going to move them this direction.
And there's all kinds of, as smarter people than me on this call understand, there's a lot of if you study things that are happening in things like Weight Watchers, other things where there's group based, it's not the content. And this is really hard for people
No.
to work on content. The content is got to have quality content. Don't get me wrong, but it's this environment of, how you bring things
I'm
around.
going to bring up Walter's thing. It's the right to operate. The
Exactly.
content is the right to operate.
That's what it is.
You have to have it.
Exactly. So basically what I did then was create a platform. The dream was I can take any content that you could turn into this methodology called Learn to Inspire with the surrounding system. And I could work with great thought leaders in the world and companies themselves to populate the platform with their content already formatted in this Learn to Inspire, methodology, which we could share on the screen. But it's basically then what else, Chris, here's the other thing. So what else then, when you think about more traditional change management, is needed to get people to move? And you have to have communication. You have to have access to other media as things develop along the time. And I developed this little model that says, these are the things that if I'm trying to lead a change initiative, I need to have these ability to create this directional commitment. People have to see progress.
Okay.
People have to be emotionally connected. And so how can I put this stuff together in one place? Because my experience as a change leader, now getting out of my role as L&D, because I ran a lot of these change projects for these
change
companies,
initiatives.
then I had to go here for the learning. I had to go here for the communication. I have to go over here to run a survey. I had to go here to look at the metrics. I had to book workshops over, it's like I'm spending more time coordinating this than I am actually working with the change. And so the idea was, can I put everything together? Not everything, right? A lot of things together in one place that would make it easier for the change leader and make it a more seamless experience for the participant of the world. And that's what Rali is. It's a change. We call it a change experience platform. And we say what we do is we empower organizations to drive scalable, measurable, and lasting change in areas that really matter. So for example, when a company wants to change their culture to be more inclusive, they can actually define what those behaviors are, and we can help them to adopt those behaviors. If they want to build a culture of quality in a healthcare system, I think we could all agree, even if I'm implementing technology, like I talk a lot of people doing digital transformation, it's not the technology that stops them. It's
I have lots of conversations in the IT circles with CIOs, and they will be the first to admit that the digital transformation work that they're leading, the problem is rarely with the technology.
Right.
I mean, it has
And
its own complexity that they're
it
dealing with
does.
on their end,
It does.
but they're like, but when it comes to adoption and change,
Right.
that's not, I mean, you can take a broken piece of technology, and if you run it through the right change process, you'll get people to adopt a broken, dysfunctional piece of technology. If you take the best technology in the world and try and digitally transform poorly, like, it doesn't matter. It does
It's
not matter.
really true. And it's like with this model that I'm talking about, like if you take lousy content, you'll still get a transformation. It just may not be what you want because the process is set up to do what it does, you know?
Okay.
But anyway, it's just like you said, it's really interesting to see. And I, part of the problem, for a company like mine, right, is that we don't fit in a nice category from
No.
the industry analysts. I
I
mean,
was just going to say the analysts wouldn't know what to do with you because they'd go,
right.
like, it's not an LXP, right? Like it's not an LMS because that's not really it. And reframe this back, and Walter, I'll get to your question on this, but I'm curious on this. To me, I almost see what you're doing in previous days. I could see this as being more of a targeted point solution where you go, hey, we have this major business transformation, and there is so much activity going on with business transformation. We need to fold this together because otherwise we're architecting an entire ecosystem around this. But now the business transformation is almost par for the course. It's just a matter of you're switching which transformation you're working on.
That's right.
I can almost see you've been on this journey where this may have moved from somebody may have a very specific use case where they go, we need to use this for this business transformation. But now it kind of grows to the point where you go, well, actually, we're kind of like basically always doing business transformation.
It is.
We just may change what the input or focus is on that. Is that a fair assessment?
That is actually right. And this is one thing that we were having fun talking about even before we came on that actually you had pointed out was that we're just coming at the problem. Like instead of talking about the problem as a development only problem, like we just need to develop some people. We're coming at it as a change problem.
Holistic.
So when people are talking to you about their issues, if you're starting to ask the question, so what really needs to change, not just in the people, but also in the environment,
the whole business piece.
You start to get this incredible insights. And then you can basically use that. Then the tools are set up so that you can initiate, drive, scale, and sustain these kinds of changes using tools in different ways on the platform. But it brings it all together. And it's all about these groups of people. It's just like always creating dialogue and insight from dialogue.
And for me, just my tech, I'm always thinking like how to architect, like how you architect some of this type of stuff.
Yeah.
And to me, and you here, I'm not an analyst, but like if I were to market categorize this in some ways is kind of like the SEAL Team 6 technology for business transformation, where you're like, listen, this isn't competing with your usual ed tech stack.
It's not at
because
all.
you still need that. You still need that for this other broader stuff. But when you've got a specific business transformation, you need kind of a suite to kind of help you get through that and keep track of all these learning and non-learning related things that actually are all tied to the change. So you can actually determine, are we making progress towards what we're trying to do or not based on some of the things you had.
That's exactly right.
Okay. Cause then that helps me kind of understand. Cause sometimes, and again, the market has just gotten so cluttered with things and everybody's using the same acronyms. And so it is hard for people to be like, wait, so what is this? And it's like, this is what you're describing is not your standard ed tech stack. This really is almost a specialty, like business transformation support technology that goes with that.
That's right. And we play nicely with the tech stack. I mean, we integrate with the tech because you're right. Because I mean, and like you said, I am a firm believer that the current tech stack is vitally important to a company. It's just that you need to go. I use the word necessary, but not sufficient, right? I think it's necessary, but not sufficient to drive adult-centered human change. It's just not set up to do that from its instantiation. I mean, I was at Motorola. We built the first LMS. You know what it was? It was a spreadsheet. I mean, we tracked stuff. I mean, it was great.
Yeah.
But believe it or not, Motorola built the first internally. We built our own LMS. It was sold. It's probably one of the companies today out there. But the philosophy, and that's changed. I don't want to underplay. There's some wonderful technology out there. I love where the industry is starting to go, but it's very confusing for people. It's very confusing.
It is. It is, especially because many people in our field are not super technical. And suddenly
Fair enough.
they're now being asked to make IT system architecture decisions that are like, I am not equipped to handle this kind of thing. And I'm accountable for it.
Yes.
And going back to what we said before, there's some heat on it where it's like, wait, I have to buy this thing and figure out how to do this thing with it. And if it doesn't, this is going to fall back on me. Like I am not equipped to handle this kind of thing. So a question from Walter, and I think this is a good one. So as you look at it, you know, because a big part of it is the ability of a change. And you talked about going back to, I'm going to pull this one back up. Part of these capabilities is kind of how you're measuring, is this change a successful, are you making progress towards that the business change you set out to do, which is not, did people complete the training? It's, did we make the successful business transformation? How are you measuring that? Or what is the measurement that goes into determining that, which I have to imagine is multifaceted?
It is, to your point. And so we have a whole, you know, data architecture thing, but the simple way to talk about it is there's two kind of measurement indices. One is kind of they're leading and lagging, right? As all measurement systems are. But in our platform, I think what's a little unique is that because we have this learn, do, inspire architecture, let's say that I'm trying to get my organization to embrace behaviors around inclusion. I'm just going to use that as a simple way. So in our learn, do, inspire, you're maybe learning why demonstrating something called respectful empathy with others is something that creates more inclusion and actually can rewire your brain. So you'll learn what and why that is. But then
the knowledge foundation.
Right. And then in the platform, you're actually being assigned a do activity that you have to go on the job and do. Now, when you do the do, you actually provide evidence of what you did, and it kicks in a learning partner automatically that's coaching you and giving you feedback and is actually verifying that you did that behavior. So one way is by the leading indicator that behavioral demonstration is being monitored. So that's one thing. The second thing is because of questions that are being asked in the platform, you're starting to see from the social construction what the themes of people are saying. This is what I'm going to do differently. What, you know, so you get that intentional, you know, the intention category of I'm going to do something differently. Now we're tracking the, you know, the lagging measures, you know, in terms of retention and things in the company. But in the middle was those four things. So what those four things are saying, I'm running this huge DEI initiative across my company. And right now, we're about halfway into it. And my gosh, people are not feeling emotionally connected. Like they don't see a higher purpose in this. And so it just
feels like another thing.
It's just another thing. And so what the data starts to show is that by department, because we're doing this through survey and pulsing on the platform, is that you start to see, I actually call them like their capabilities model, but it's a performance measure of your change. And so it's kind of saying, okay, now let's go, you know, these 5 departments look like they're lagging on emotional connection. What do we need to do to help them? Is there something the manager needs to do? Can we put a lot of times that can be communicated through video, emotional connection. So it gives the change leader almost like a dashboard to say, oh my gosh,
here's the health of this transformation in these. Well, and what I like about it is, so hopefully, Walter, that answers your question. Because and I'm going to kind of rewind this back or play it back, because I think what's really helpful with that is some of these things like digital transformation and business transformation are very ethereal. And to me, one of the biggest opportunities I've seen in organizations is they stay there. They stay in this stratosphere space, and it makes it very difficult because we never ask the questions of, right, but what does it actually mean for us to, you know, get into this? What does it actually mean to create directional commitment? How are we determining whether we have that? so that we can assess it. I mean, let's have these conversations. Are we making progress? Is there well, what does it mean to have an emotional connection?
Exactly.
Let's define that.
Let's define that.
Being able to actually define that makes it easy to measure, because if you define it, then you can go, okay, well, that's what we think success looks like, which often, in my opinion, has been a step that gets skipped a lot.
That's right.
It's, well, here's the end outcome we want to get to. Right. But what are all the steps along the way, and what does good look like, so that we can, like you said, have a dashboard of pulse health to go, we're missing it. Like, people still are not feeling like they're connected to it.
Yeah.
We need to do something and determine, is this an educational outcome? They just don't get it.
Right.
We need them to do something.
Right.
Or they need to be inspired. And
Yep.
I think those three, again, it just helps break down what are the change categories, because you don't want to do things if you don't know how. Period. Like,
No, you
just don't want to. You're like, I don't feel comfortable doing something. I mean, there's probably the 5% that would do it anyway and be like, I don't know what I'm doing, but like, what the heck? Let's try this. The majority need that knowledge base. Even if they're comfortable with it, they're not going to continue doing it if they're not inspired to. If it's just like, this is just noise, I'll do it for like a couple weeks.
Yep.
Then I'm going to go back to doing my usual thing. So I think you've actually created a construct that, in layman terms, actually makes sense around change.
We actually call them change journeys, right? So that's the thing, the learn to inspire we call, because again, it's not a, and again, it's not a learning journey per se, the way, again, what I'm reacting to too is, at least in my experience, I love, what other people think, but unfortunately, because content has become so free that people associate the word learning with what I would call the know about stuff. Like, I can watch a video and fix my refrigerator, maybe, but
I won't do it. But if you're that brave, go for it.
No, more times than not. More times than not. But I think, unfortunately, in our corporate lives, learning has been associated with information. So I have a hard time sometimes distinguishing true learning from information. So I really think it's important to break up the learning and the doing.
Yeah. And that intentional, that's where the word learning to me has gotten so ubiquitous. I really don't like it. I mean, even if you look up the word learning in Merriam's dictionary, it literally says to acquire knowledge or skill. And to me, I go, those are not the same thing.
They're not. But
acquiring knowledge and acquiring skill are not the same thing. And I think that's a big miss. And I think, to your point, because content has become so frequent, it has just become I learned something new. I mean, are you comfortable doing it? Oh, no.
Yeah, no.
Oh, heavens, no. I would never. I'm not comfortable with that.
I know about surgery. I know
about it.
But I mean, again, not to get too off track, but if people understand the genesis of our industry, it really came with the U.S. Army. And the U.S. Army, when they talked about training, and they created the first instructional designers in the world, and they were training, to them meant learning and doing. That's what it meant. But in corporate life now, it's more content. And so anyway, I mean, that's just,
No, but I think it's a little bit of a sidetrack, but at the same time, it's not, because if we don't catch that as the professionals, in my opinion, the guardians of this, if we end up getting sucked into that, all hope is lost.
Yeah.
Because if we go down that path, all hope is lost. Like, we actually have an opportunity to be the guardians of that and go, learning is both knowing and doing. And we can't pick one or the other. We have to do both, because there are so often times, I mean, I think everybody who would listen or watch this would say, come on, we've all been in that conversation where somebody's like, these people need training on this, or they need to learn this. And if you ask a follow-up question, what do you want them to do? It's just like crickets. Like, what do you mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, if you want them to learn it, they have to do something with it. I mean, if not, what is the point of learning it? Well, it's just good information for them to have. Then send an email. Like, I don't.
Well, and I was really fascinated by the question that was asked. And the only last thing I would say about that was and you see it with the learn to inspire, but the point is, how do we know that people are more able to do this? And this is what is very interesting. We find that as companies embrace this, this learn to inspire language ends up showing up in lots of places. So as they do these cycles of learn to inspire over time, because our platform, you don't do it. It's like a little bit over time. It's definitely micro learning, micro doing, it's very like in the flow of work kind of stuff. But the point is that as they do these cycles, then they tell us that they feel more able to continue to do those cycles in new areas. So we'll see them even having meetings organized using like part of it's going to be learning, part of it's going to be doing, but so it's like, that's what's heartening, is that it's just a simple thing to remember as a way of saying, how am I going to get better at tennis? Well, I got to learn some things. I got to go hit the ball, and I'm going to work with other people. So I need to change my forehand. Like, here's a little approach for you.
I had a very successful run with, it was similar, a little bit different, but it was do feel. And the feel was kind of the same, right? Feel. Yeah. It's like, there's an emotional component to it.
Yeah.
If you don't care about it,
it doesn't matter.
Even if you know how to do it and you have all the head knowledge and all the skill, you're not going to do it. So whether it's, there's this emotional connection to, does this matter to me? And that's not, well, I got a, warning report that I'm going to show up on some compliance. That'll get you to maybe do it long enough to just get off the list,
right?
But that's not actually going to drive sustainable behavior change.
That's right. Exactly.
So my question, another question from Walter on this, and I'm curious, I think I know the answer to this, but did you base this off an existing model like Prosy or something like that? Or was this something that just kind of through your experience, you said, I'm going to do some of my own research and I've got an opinion on why I think I see the no, and I have an opinion on why I think so and why I'm supportive of it. But I'm just curious your answer first.
Yeah, no, it's like, it wasn't really, I'm aware. So as part of my role as CLO for these companies, I also own the change management practice for the company, which included like, what methodology are we going to use? What methodology? And then what, how are we going to equip people, especially in leadership roles, to know how to lead and manage, and all that stuff, and then leading change projects. And again, I don't think it's just because I want to create something new myself, but no. I just felt them wanting in some ways, because I love Cotter models. I love Prosy models. They're very helpful, but I find them to be, this is just me in the way that other people interpret them, is they find them, it's almost like the waterfall approach, right? There's very linear. I've never done a change that wasn't so messy. And so the reality, it's a mess. And so we need to embrace, my whole thing is, let's embrace the mess. It's messy. How can we tip the scales? I call it bending the change curve in our favor, so that we don't go through these big valleys of despair and all these things that people go through. And so but it was, but no, I will be very clear. It was built.
I'm going to be very supportive. No, yeah, I get it. And I saw your reaction on it, which to me, the thing with it that I think is really helpful with this, because I'm similar to you sometimes. And I've been in organizations where they're very like, well, it has to be tied to this and and which competency model that by blah, 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 top 4 big firm has put this out. And I'm always like, to your point, it's like, I get it, but I also feel like it's missing in that it's almost overcomplicating something in areas that I don't think need to be complicated.
Yeah. Gotcha.
Yet overlooking things that are like, you're missing the forest through the trees, but you're making it super complicated in other areas where we don't. And I think where I've seen success in that, to people who may be listening going, well, our org's all about Prosy. We do Prosy for everything like that.
Yeah.
Where I've seen success in things like this, because I was in an org when we did no, feel, do. And it was like, that's not the change model we follow. And I'm like, so we did a mapping exercise to say, okay, like, here's how this maps back to it. We're not creating a new way of change because at the end of the day, change is change. But so that people don't have agita over, wait, we're reinventing the wheel. We can tie the two to it. It's just, like you said, change is messy. And I think too often we treat it like it's this nice linear, oh, well, just do the change. Like we're here and then we take the next step. And like you said, every change I've been on, you get to step 7 and you get kicked in the face and you're back at step 1 going like, how did we get here?
How'd we get here? Exactly. And I mean, there's for many years when you said change management, you look at technology. Here's what's interesting. Go search change management technologies on the web. And what you'll find is you'll find really, really cool project management tools. And
Yes.
you'll find a lot of stuff in the IT world about change control, which of course is important. But you won't find as much stuff you won't find anything, quite frankly, that blends the idea of those things together with a really people-centric development approach. It's, then you start to tip over, well, isn't that what an LMS is for? And so I know we're kind of sitting in this kind of weird place, but it's
you are, but you're spot on. I mean, legitimately, and I think this is honestly one of the reasons so many change management efforts fail is it's treated like a project plan.
That's it. And
it's like, we're in this nice clean phase of, oh geez, I can't even keep straight the change models that I've used, but right. Like, we're in this one, we're in stage 1.
Right.
And so we need to do all these activities and what are the work streams and can we check the box that it's done? And then once we're there, it's going to waterfall over into phase 2.
That's
and
right.
It never works that way. And you're right about the tech. The tech is either on this hardcore smart sheet, here's a template that you can pop into there or a Trello board, and we call that change, or it's all about like the change control, locking things down, moving through people through the adoption phase. So I wholeheartedly agree with you in the opportunity.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And that's why I landed on this simple, learn to inspire, and these 4 things, which are more about, like you said, I can do my change plan, but what are my capabilities to listen to employees? What capability? Because what learning people really can do is be the listening post for the organization as change is rolling out. The learning people are touching more people than anybody in the company. So instead of just thinking about yourself as a delivery function, think about yourself as a listening post. And what insight can you give to how people are absorbing this stuff? So anyway, it's just like, I like to think in terms of, yes, there's steps, but underlying that, it's like, you got to have an engine. Like you have to have the capability of an engine in your car. Driving is my activity, but what are the capabilities that gets me to drive? So I think there's several, not to make it overly complicated, but it's like, there's these little levels of things. And, I was just trying to kind of, how can I work at the very practical human level of this stuff?
Yeah. Well, and hang on, this comment cracked me up. I got to see who it is because it didn't come through who, so I need to look here. Hang on. Oh, Sam. Sam. This is so true, right? Everybody when it comes to these change projects, it's so focused on the project. Well, what is the deadline? When's this thing going to be done? What are we done with these milestones? Is Tiger Team X, done? And it's like, oh, is there anything left for the change management? You're like, oh, we don't really have time for that. We're so busy on these project activities. I don't have time to actually make the change stick. And to me, it is such a missed opportunity.
It is.
And I feel like more than ever, businesses are feeling it because over the past couple years, business transformation, I mean, it's always been an important thing, but I never, in my career, it's never felt like you either do it or you die as an organization.
No, absolutely.
And I feel like that's where we are.
That's right.
You're going to do it. And you're going to constantly be doing it. Like when you think your transformation's done, get ready to start another one, because if you don't, you're going to die, type of a thing. And that kind of environment has raised this to the point where you might have been able to get away with not doing this well and been like, oh, well, the transformation failed again, but we'll just write it off as whatever. And now it's like, we're not going to make it as an org if we don't get this right. So
well, I know we're running up against the hour, but I was curious I don't know if anybody's out there thinking, so what the heck does this thing actually look like that he's talking about? Is it okay if I flash that up for 1 second?
Yeah, pull it up.
Just so kind of demystify that a little bit, maybe.
That's true. You know what? For you, Larry, we can go a couple minutes over. Don't worry about it. Yes.
Let me log back in.
All right.
You should see it now, Chris.
Okay.
And
it is there. There we go.
There we go. Okay. So very quick. What people are doing is there are certain initiative areas the company is focused on. So you can see that. And then we have 3 major sections. This is actually a communication center that uses interactive video where leaders can actually talk about the change and why they're doing it, what it means, build that directional commitment and that emotional engagement right away during the change. Then you have your kind of action center where as you do things in the journey section, that'll actually give you things that you need to do for yourself and for your peers. And the actual journey section, for example, this is our diversity, equity, inclusion initiative. This is what I was talking about with my learn. You can see the learn, do, inspire.
Okay.
Each one of these learns is like 15 minutes. This is an on-the-job behavior. And this is, and the inspire is where you're sharing stories or appreciating others. And, you know, you're on a network of people. You're forming discussions with other people. There's a leaderboard. The whole experience is gamified.
So you're actually bringing the whole team or org that is involved in this transformation through this and saying, you are part of this transformation.
You got it.
This is the journey we're on to actually do this, and we're carrying it forward.
Exactly. So we're bringing them all together in this journey together. And then, as you know, because change is messy, as we talked about, then as the change rolls out, other supporting ideas and content are going to be needed. So this is where change leaders or users can actually create video. What's different about us is all the video is wrapped in our proprietary interactive engine, where as people are playing the video, it actually, you can embed actual questions in the timeline, and it stops, and I can add my own comments and everything that's happening.
So then going back to this assessment piece that Walter asked before, is that if you identify that, hey, there's an opportunity in the do, inspire, knowledge piece that you go, we're not making it, we're not where we need to be, you're then actually, that change leaders augmenting it, going, we need to kind of bring people along to help with some of this additional stuff.
And they can support that. They can, you know, we're building, I'll say this, we're building algorithms that are going to automatically notify people when they see certain data points coming into play for the change leaders at the department level and at the organizational level. And they're always able to look at data from both the social networks to find, you know, areas of discussion, emphasis, and things like that. Yeah. So that's,
you know, and and it's helpful because, again, sometimes even just like getting a view for what you're talking about. But I think the point, one thing that came to mind, and I think this is an important, you tell me if I'm wrong, is one thing that unrelated to the technology is an opportunity to help organizations with. And I think this is one I've seen in every org is you can't have 10,000 business transformation efforts, because if everything's a top priority, nothing's a priority. And so to some degree, even as I'm seeing what you're doing there, being able to help the organization go, I get we have a lot of things going, but what are the most critical transformation efforts that we go, we will not make it as an organization if we don't do it. Going back to kind of right to operate, let's not mess with the right to operate, but let's pick those key things and say who is in that. And let's actually make this transformation a success.
You got it. And I think that's what we love to do, quite frankly, is we get in there, you know, and help. And we help figure that out first. And then we help, I call it, you know, we become your ride or die as your change partner. You know?
Well, because I'm just picturing some orgs without that support. Somebody's going to go into there and they're going to be like, I've got to pick from 73 of the business and be like, I can't. So it is really, there is that front end exercise of going, no, we need to figure out like, what are the most critical and who really is involved in that transformation, because everybody can't be involved in everything going on, and we can't consider everything a transformation or we won't do it.
Yep, exactly. So there's that, you know, that kind of thinking it together kind of part of the process, but absolutely. So
I love it. Well, we will wrap it up by Boss's final comment by saying we're gonna help organizations move from
Freak out.
Knowing, doing, and inspiring. We're going to take them to that, away from freaking out, do, check, and react to it. So again, I think this is such a needed focus area for organizations at a time where truly it is very disruptive for businesses. So I appreciate just you being here and us having this conversation. And I think in addition to talking about how the technology can support it, there's a lot of food for thought for folks in our industry, not only in the work we do in learning, but also how do we start to expand our skill set to be more than just the learning leader and truly be the transformation leader.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. I mean, honestly, it's like, this is such a great experience, just getting to know you and getting to know, what you're thinking about. And I just thank to everybody who took the time out today to hang out with us. So really.
Well, thanks everybody for the comments, for participating, and we will see you next week. Have a great week, everyone, and we will talk to you on the other side.